Thump, thump, thump. The rhythmic, slow, steady sound of a fading heartbeat. The heartbeat belongs to a man laying on the ground. His head was throbbing, his vision was dark. The air upon his skin felt like sharp knives cutting away at his flesh. The man slightly opens his eyes to have the bright, yellow sun flood his vision like water floods a valley. Suddenly, a figure stood in front of the sun, his presence creating the absence of light. The figure stretched out his right arm. In his hand was a giant, sharp rock. The figure let out a battle cry and brought the rock down on the man's head. Just then, Arthur woke up in a cold sweat. Each breath was heavy. Each vein in his body protruded from his skin like snakes. His blood went cold. Darkness surrounded him. He welcomed it. Arthur was on a ship bound for Mercury. The sound of the soft, steady engines echoed in his ear. It was soothing. It reminded him of the lullaby his mother sang to Arthur and his brother when he was but a mere child. He began to hum the beautiful melody, and then, in a hushed whisper, he began to sing.
Tend to your fears, for there are hidden thorns. Tend to your sheep, for the wolf watches evermore. Tend to your kin, for the serpent's tongue is a sword. Tend to your fears, for there are thorns.
Arthur put his hand over his eyes. He began to softly sob. The tears that accumulated from his eyes ran down his chin and soaked his chest.
Forgive me.
He softly uttered through shaking breaths. 2 hours had passed. Arthur sat still in his bed. Finally, he mustered up the urge to stand up and recompose himself. Arthur bathed himself to wash off the stench of depression. When he was fully clothed, he walked to the front of the ship and saw Maria sitting in a chair reading a book. "There you are," she said, sounding like she just pushed a brick off of her chest. "I was starting to think you'd never wake up," she said, placing the book under her chair.
How long was I out?
Arthur asked, sitting down in the chair beside her. 3 weeks, 4 days, and 15 hours, she said, looking over to a monitor. "If I didn't know any better, I'd say you were long overdue for a good rest," she said sarcastically while smirking.
I haven't slept in over 800 years.
Arthur softly muttered. Maria looked over at him. Although she didn't say anything, her expression was filled with shades of sorrow.
How long before we get to Mercury?
He said, folding his hands in his lap and slightly leaning towards her. "In about 2 hours," she said, as she looked up to the stars.
Good,
he proclaimed.
That gives us enough time,
he said, standing up from his chair. "Enough time for what?" she asked, looking up to him.
To learn about your Wendigo,
he said rather abruptly. "What do you mean by your..." Before she could finish her sentence, she paused. Both shock and realization spread across her face. "Oh my God, you know these creatures, don't you?" she said, also standing up from her chair.
Not this one,
he muttered.
Which is why I need to know everything about these creatures. Where they live, what they eat, how they walk, how they communicate, what makes them tick. Do they have fur? Do they shed? Do they have scales? Do they pop any of them? I need to know everything. Do you understand?
He said, getting close to her as he stared into her eyes. There was something in his voice. It almost sounded like fear. Fear of the unknown. And not even him, the anomaly, the man who could not die, was immune to it. "You first," Maria demanded.
Excuse me?
Arthur said, with confusion spreading across his face. Let me make something clear, she said, a hint of anger in her voice. You don't like me, and I sure as hell don't like you. But if we're going to work together, we need to be honest with each other. I will tell you everything you need to know about these creatures, but first, you tell me how you're familiar with them, she demanded, jabbing one finger into his chest. He stared at her for a moment. His expression was like stone.
Wendigo, the cannibalistic giant, spirit of the mountain, flesh eater, take your pick,
he said as he started to pace around her.
At first, it was just believed to be a Native American legend, that if anyone resorted to cannibalism, the spirit of the Wendigo would take their mind, body, and soul over, turning them into something else entirely,
he said, turning away from her.
In 1958, the Wendigo was confirmed to be a very real and dangerous creature. At first, it was just believed that the spirit only dwelled in the mountain, hence calling it Spirit of the Mountain,
he said, turning towards her with his index finger raised in the air.
But then we discovered something even more terrible. It wasn't just associated with the mountain. It was associated anywhere that a person resorted to cannibalism. Deserts, rainforest, metropolitan areas, it didn't matter,
he said, getting closer and closer to her face.
All that mattered is if someone grew hungry enough to eat human flesh. If someone became that low. That is how I know these creatures. I hunted them for years, and in the year 3049, they were hunted to extinction. Nothing has been heard from them since. No sightings, nothing. But some say the spirit of the Wendigo still exists in the world,
he said, his deep blue eyes cutting through her soul like a knife cuts through butter. I don't understand. Is it a creature or is it a spirit? She asked, with fear and confusion filling her voice.
See, that's where the controversy lies. Some believe that it's a spirit that possesses you when you get your first taste of human flesh, never allowing you to satisfy your hunger. Others believe that the Wendigo lives inside of you, waiting for you to slip into that point of pure depravity and insanity,
he said, turning away from her again, resting both hands on his hips. She swallowed. She was unnerved. And, what do you believe? She asked, with fear shaking her voice.
What I believe? I believe they're both true, just in different words,
he said, turning his head towards her slightly. How is that possible? How can two completely different theories both be true? He began to laugh.
If you take 6 people and put them in a room and tell them all the same story, and they leave that room only to have someone on the outside ask them to summarize that story, and they all give the same summarization, well, then you know that the person telling the story told them exactly what to summarize about that story. However, if they all summarize the story differently, it doesn't mean they all heard a different story. No. All it means is that they're telling you the same story, just in their own words,
he said, while once again walking closer to her.
Now, it's your turn. Tell me everything about your Wendigo,
he demanded. Wendigo is our word for it. In your tongue, it would mean sunspot. It's a creature that bathes in sunlight. And, well, it's true it can dwell in the darkness. It is severely weakened, she said, breathing heavily, as the topic clearly made her uncomfortable. What they eat, what they do, how they communicate is purely random. They are truly mindless monsters, she said, walking closer to him with her voice shaking. However, they have one ability that is more dangerous than you could possibly imagine.
And what might that be?
He asked, mockingly.
They know what you did. What did you just say to me?
He asked, with anger and confusion swelling in his voice. They're able to get inside your head, she said, sounding confused. Arthur slightly shook his head. He looked around for a moment. Is everything all right? Maria asked, sounding concerned.
Nothing, just nothing. What do you mean, get inside your head?
He asked, with concern and curiosity in his voice. They're able to project memories, regrets, sorrows, anything that you have done in your past that can haunt you. I don't know if they do it intentionally or if it's just a part of their anatomy, a defense mechanism. The point is, we don't know because when I say they're mindless, they truly are mindless, she proclaimed.
And what do they look like? These sunspots.
It's easier if I show you. After all, we are here. After she said this, the craft that they were in landed. The door opened to a barren, cold, and gray world. The stars that filled the sky gave little to no light to the still cold side of the planet that they were on. The planet was flat, with the only protrusion from the ground being solid white ice caps that reflected the starlight, illuminating the ground just enough so that they could navigate each step they took. Although he had never been there before, Arthur could easily tell that the planet was dying.
Before we go to your base, take me to the other side,
he said, stopping and looking towards her. The other side? What do you mean, the other side? She asked, with confusion and anger ruminating in her voice.
You know exactly what I mean. Take me there, now.
Do you honestly have any idea what you are asking me? She asked in frustration. To risk my safety, my people's safety, to go to the other side just to show you what it looks like? She yelled.
To understand these creatures, I need to see where they come from.
Oh, bullshit, she proclaimed. I understand that you blame me for the death of your daughter.
Let me make something very clear to you. You don't bring up my daughter. Ever.
You honestly think you're the only person who has lost something, don't you? I've lost people too, Arthur, she said softly.
You have no idea what loss is,
he said as he gritted through his teeth. Fine, she said. I'll take you to the other side. As they walked, Arthur looked up to the moonless dark sky. The sky was not black. Rather, it was the absence of light. The absence of light that he saw in his dreams. The absence of the light that belonged to him.
Does it remind you?
A voice asked softly from the darkness.
Does it remind you of all the pain that you've caused? All the lives that you've destroyed? Or does it remind you of the one, the first one, the only one that mattered, the one that made you the way you are?
The voice softly chuckled and then continued.
You know what these creatures are, even if you don't want to admit it. Even if you don't want to recognize it. You know exactly what they are. You don't need to see the other side. You're just delaying the inevitable. You know that he followed you here. You know that he's tracking you. You know that your time has finally come. For the absence of light has come to steal you away in the night.
Again, the voice chuckled. Arthur stopped and slowly looked over his shoulder to see nothing. Nothing but emptiness and darkness. Arthur, what's wrong? Maria asked as she looked over to him.
Nothing.
He replied.
We should keep moving.
Finally, They had reached the other side. A fiery wall separated them from the Wendigos. The light scorched the other side, yet it did not harm them, nor did it burn hot, nor was it painful to the naked eye. It just separated the two sides of the planet. Arthur stared at it intensely. "This is it. It's strange, isn't it?" Maria said to Arthur. "It's almost as if something is protecting us. Something is blocking the light from coming to our side of the planet." Arthur raised his hand to his face and stared at it, then slowly pushed it to the other side of the planet. As he did, it was almost like a wall opened up in front of him. When his hand entered the wall, it closed around his arm. He could see his skin burning away and healing itself, only to do it all over again. Arthur pulled his hand out, and immediately, his hand healed.
Interesting,
Arthur said softly. "What is it?" Maria asked, with curiosity in her voice.
It's not protection for you. It's protection for them.
So that was Sunspots Part 1 by Mr. RandoCalrissian, featuring the Mr. RandoCalrissian himself. In fact, the author has a message he wanted to share with you all, so here you go.
Hey everyone. So I just wanted to make an apology real quick for people who have been waiting for this story. Things in 2020, for obvious reasons, have not been that great. And I've been struggling with some depression and anxiety issues. So I do apologize for the lightness of this story. However, I have started to write again, and this is the first in a 3-part series. So I hope you all will listen to the next 2 parts and enjoy every second of it. Thank you so much to everyone who's took the time out of their day to listen, and thank you to Raven for always doing an amazing job. I love all of you. God bless, and as always, may the Force be with you.
And with that said, thank you again to Rando for voicing Arthur. Thank you for letting me narrate the story, and I'll see you guys in the next one. But until then, sleep well.